People ask, which AC30 should I buy? Which is the one to get? Which is the best quality? Which has the sound? And the answer, with one caveat, is all of them or none of them. All of them can be made to sound fantastic. All of them can be made right, but all of them have problems as they leave the factory. I'm not going to get into each one right now. These are going to get separate videos later. But the TBX has got bad hums and is overfiltered. The C2 has got too much gain and it's overfiltered. The hand wired has got some components that don't sound very great. It's got really cheap transformers for the price point, really cheap pots for the price point, and it's also overfiltered. And the Custom Classic as well. It's too bright, not enough compression, reverb tank's terrible, but all four of those amps, the Custom Classic's not represented here, just because I don't have one for this purpose right now. But all four of those can be made to sound like a real AC30. The only one I would steer people away from, unless you really, really want the EF86 channel, is the Heritage series. I guess that's about 10 years ago, before they came out with the hand wired. The Heritage series use fake turret boards. So they have turrets that all the components are mounted on, but those turrets are soldered to little thin pads on the bottom of the PCB board. And it's a lot of mechanical stress on a very small solder joint on a very thin flexible board. And I have found that those things like to fail. So I would avoid those unless you just have to have the EF86. So as you can tell, these amps are no longer stock. All three of them have mercury magnetic output transformers. Got the Haddon, the Woden, the Woden. These two have the power and chokes. This one still has the stock power transformer. It does not have a choke. This model doesn't have a choke. It doesn't really need it for reasons I'll get into later when I do the video just on this. Now, this amp came in. Someone else had already changed out all the transformers. That's fine. This amp came in. I was only going to change the output transformer, but the stock power transformer had a really bad mechanical buzz. It was mechanical, it was acoustic, and it was injecting itself into the speakers. So it had to go. And while I was in there, I did the choke just so everything matches. So none of these are stock. The inside of each one of these I've modded to sound like a particularly good sounding example from 65. Now I work on originals as well. I don't just work on copies or the modern ones. And when I get an original in, I measure everything that's in it. And the old resistors drift a lot. And sometimes it doesn't sound very good. And sometimes it sounds awesome. Sometimes you'll say, wow, that value that resistor ended up at really makes this amp sound fantastic for a particular playing style. So I've got a notebook of all the things I've noted in old JMIs. And when I find the magic value for this resistor or that resistor or whatever, I'll pop a new resistor of that value into a new amp and have a new amp that sounds a lot like the 55, 60-year-old amp. And that's what I've done on all three of these. All three of these have the same values. The voltages in each amp are within about 6 volts of each other. So, and in fact, in the videos, this amp and this amp are even using the same quad of output tubes. This one's got all Mullards. This one's got Mullard preamps, and it had the preferred series EL84s. This has got all preferred series tubes in it. So 7025s, 5AR4, and 7189s. So they're very comparable. Each amp is biased about the same. They're idling about 13 watts. So with the variation from amp to amp, this is kind of a horses for courses. That's not what I'm looking for. Apples to apples. Sorry, it's a little bit early for metaphor. But I'm going to pause this and show you the recording setup. Okay, so each chassis was set here on this GK bass amp. This is the stand. And each amp is being played through the Vox cab that belongs to the C2X. It's got a pair of Alnico Blue Celestions in there. You can see the pedal board down at the bottom left. That's only out because I was using the tuner. No effects at any time on this video. Every guitar was straight into the amp. A lot of people who use AC30s, Brian May, Edge, Radiohead, lots of guys, even Rory Gallagher, always used a lot of effects. And that's a big rabbit hole to get into when doing amp comparisons. And doesn't tell you that much about the amp. So I decided no effects. Some of the bands that I mentioned, I do reference some of their work in these videos. I tried to choose examples that either did not have much in the way of effects, or where you can still hear what the bedrock of the amp was. And you can't shine a turd. You've got to have a good quality thing before you add the effects. I think that'll demonstrate that. So the guitars, this is my parts Castratelli, built to 51 spec. It's got an Area T neck and an Area T 615 bridge pickup. My Eric Johnson Strat, which is alder with a maple body, which is a little bit rare to hear. It's got Kenman traditional pickups. And then my friend's R8 Les Paul, which has OX4 pickups, which are kind of a medium output PAF clone. This is kind of the holy trinity as far as guitars that people who like AC30s usually like. We'll get into the Steve Vai stuff in another video, but I bet Steve Vai would sound pretty cool on this too. Anyway, I'm going to do this video in 3 parts because I've got this long introduction. Then the second video is going to be showing all 3 guitars through the Top Boost the Top Boost Brilliant channel. And then the third video will be on the normal channel. And after that, I'm going to do some follow-up videos that I'll add links to and all that. It'll be in a playlist where I'll show the pros and cons of each model as they are in stock form. Before we get to the playing video, I just want to say that something I forgot before. I wasn't really stressed about setting the knobs exactly the same on each amp for each part, both because there's so much variation in tolerance between pots. One amp may sound exactly the same as another amp. First amp has this, second amp has this. There's just so much variation. You just got to play around with it, see what sounds good on that particular amp. Second of all, honestly, it was some of the performances were 20 minutes apart because I did all the passes on the Top Boost, then did all the passes on the C2X, then did all the passes on the hand-wired. So by the time I got to the hand-wired, I didn't remember precisely where I'd set the knobs on the TBX, but I did remember what I was hearing in my head and going for. And some takes, I think I got closer to that than others. I was trying to do this in one afternoon, so I wasn't spending a bunch of time. You know, there's no click track, no headphones, so the tempo is a bit free flowing. The worst example of that is on one of the Strat clips where someone knocked on the door in the middle of it. You can hear me slow down and turn to my and see me turn to my right and say, "What the hell, man?" But anyway, hope you enjoy. I think it does show that each amp is capable of truly great AC30 sounds.